Here you are. Thank you so much.
Can I have one?
Of course, here you go.
The fire is warm tonight.
It is. The stars are so bright.
They watch over us.
We have to keep moving. I know, but I'm scared. Trust me, we're almost there. All right.
The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel louder. In a small village surrounded by tall trees and dusty paths, people believed that family was the one bond that could never be broken. Blood was sacred. Sisters were meant to protect each other, stand together through hardship, and share every joy and sorrow. But sometimes the deepest wounds are not caused by strangers. Sometimes the person who hurts you the most is the one who grew up beside you, the one who shares your blood. This is one of those old African tales that elders whisper when the fire burns low and the moon is high in the sky. It is a folk tale about love, jealousy, trust, and a secret so dark that even the spirits of the forest seem to hold their breath. Long ago, in a peaceful village not far from a winding river, there lived two sisters. Everyone in the village knew them. They were known as the daughters of a kind woman who worked hard every day to raise them after their father passed away. The older sister was named Amara. She was gentle, thoughtful, and always ready to help anyone in need. People often said her heart was as warm as the morning sun. The younger sister was named Sade. Sade was beautiful, clever, and quick with her words. She laughed easily and could charm almost anyone she met. But deep inside her heart lived a feeling she tried very hard to hide. It was a feeling that grew quietly over the years, like a small shadow slowly stretching longer with every passing day. You see, wherever Amara went, people praised her kindness. Whenever someone in the village needed help, it was Amara they called. When elders spoke about the future of the village, they would smile and say, "That girl Amara will bring great honor to her family." At first, Sade only felt a small sting when she heard those words. But as time passed, that sting slowly turned into something heavier, something darker. The two sisters shared everything. They worked together in the fields, fetched water from the river, and cooked meals for their mother in the evenings. To anyone watching, they looked inseparable. They laughed together, told stories under the stars, and even braided each other's hair before festivals. But sometimes, when no one else was looking, Sade would watch her sister with a strange look in her eyes. A look that no one noticed, or maybe, no one wanted to notice. One year, when the dry season finally ended and the rains returned, the village prepared for the Great Moon Festival. It was the most important celebration of the year. Drums would echo through the night, dancers would fill the village square, and families would gather to give thanks for the blessings of life. This year, however, the festival carried even more excitement. The village chief had announced that during the celebration, a young woman would be chosen to represent the village in the regional gathering of nearby communities. It was a great honor. The chosen girl would travel with the elders, meet important leaders, and bring pride to her family. Many girls in the village hoped to be chosen. But in the quiet corners of the marketplace, people whispered the same name again and again. Amara. Who else could it be, they said. She is kind, wise, and respected by everyone. Every time Sade heard those whispers, the shadow in her heart grew a little darker. She smiled on the outside, of course. She even told her sister, "If they choose you, I will be the happiest person in the village." Amara believed her. Why wouldn't she? Sade was her sister. Her own blood. As the days passed and the festival grew closer, something began to change. Sade started disappearing for long hours. Sometimes she would return late in the evening with dust on her feet and a strange silence in her voice. When Amara asked where she had been, Sade would simply smile and say, "Just walking by the river. I needed some fresh air." But one night, an old woman from the edge of the village saw something unusual. She saw Sade walking deep into the forest. And she was not alone. The old woman watched from the shadows as Sade spoke to someone hidden beneath the tall trees. The wind carried only pieces of their conversation, but the woman heard enough to feel a chill run down her spine. The next morning, the old woman tried to tell someone what she had seen. But before she could speak, something unexpected happened. The day of the Great Moon Festival arrived. The drums began to play. The villagers gathered in colorful clothing. The air was filled with excitement, laughter and dancing. And just as everyone expected, the elders called Amara to stand before the village. Smiles spread across the crowd. Her mother wiped tears of pride from her eyes. And Sade stood beside her sister, clapping with everyone else. But hidden behind that smile, something terrible had already begun. Because while the whole village celebrated Amara's honor, Sade carried a secret plan in her heart. A plan that would change both of their lives forever. And before the night of the festival was over, the villagers would learn a painful truth whispered in many African folktales. Sometimes the greatest evil does not come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from your own blood sister. The drums of the Great Moon Festival echoed through the village as the sun slowly slipped behind the trees. Lanterns made from woven grass and glowing fireflies lit the pathways, and the smell of roasted corn and sweet cassava filled the evening air. Children ran through the crowd laughing, while elders sat together sharing stories of old times. It was the kind of night the village would remember for many years. At the center of the celebration stood Amara. She wore a beautiful cloth wrapped around her shoulders, decorated with bright patterns that shimmered under the lantern light. Around her neck hung a simple necklace her mother had given her when she was young. Amara looked both proud and shy as the villagers greeted her with smiles and warm words. "Your father would have been proud," one of the elders told her gently. Amara lowered her eyes and thanked him with a soft smile. Nearby, Sade stood among the crowd watching everything closely. Anyone who looked at her would have seen a sister celebrating her sibling's honor. She clapped when others clapped. She smiled when people congratulated Amara. She even wrapped her arm around her sister's shoulders for a moment as they stood together in the village square. But deep inside, Sade's thoughts were restless. Every cheer from the crowd felt like a stone dropping into her chest. She watched as people surrounded Amara with praise and admiration. Some brought small gifts. Others offered blessings for her journey to the regional gathering. Even the village chief spoke kindly to her, placing a hand on her shoulder and saying, "You will represent us well." Sade felt the familiar shadow in her heart stretch even longer. For years she had listened to the same words. For years she had stood just a little behind her sister, smiling while others celebrated Amara's goodness. Tonight was no different. But tonight, something had already been set into motion. Later in the evening, as the dancing grew louder and the drums quickened their rhythm, Sade quietly slipped away from the crowd. Most people were too busy celebrating to notice her absence. The square was full of movement and laughter. Amara noticed, though. She turned once during the dancing and looked around, expecting to see her sister nearby. But Sade was gone. At first, Amara thought nothing of it. Perhaps Sade had gone to help their mother or greet someone at the edge of the village. Sade was always moving, always talking with people. Still, a small feeling of unease touched Amara's mind. She pushed the thought away and continued smiling as villagers came to greet her. Meanwhile, Sade walked quickly along a narrow path leading away from the village square. The music of the festival slowly faded behind her as she moved toward the darker part of the village where the trees grew thick. The moon had risen high in the sky, casting pale silver light across the ground. Sade kept walking until she reached the edge of the forest. There, beneath a tall baobab tree, someone was already waiting. The figure stood quietly in the shadows. The person's face was difficult to see in the dim light, but their presence seemed calm, almost too calm for the late hour. "You came?" the voice said softly. Sade looked around to make sure no one had followed her. "Yes," she replied. For a moment neither of them spoke. The wind rustled the leaves above them, and somewhere deep in the forest an owl called into the night. "Everything is happening just as we discussed," Sade said quietly. The shadowed figure nodded slowly. "And your sister?" the voice asked. Sade hesitated. Back in the village square, Amara's laughter could still faintly be heard, carried by the wind. "She trusts me," Sade said at last. The words hung in the air between them. The figure stepped a little closer, still hidden mostly by darkness. "Trust is powerful," the voice said. "It opens doors that would otherwise remain closed." Sade folded her arms and stared toward the distant lights of the village. For a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Doubt. But it disappeared almost as quickly as it came. "I've waited too long," she said firmly. "Tonight everything changes." Far away the festival continued. The dancers formed circles, their feet moving in rhythm with the drums. Sparks from the fire rose into the sky like tiny stars. Amara had begun to feel the strange uneasiness again. She looked around the square once more. Still no sign of Sade. "Have you seen my sister?" she asked one of the girls standing nearby. The girl shook her head. "I thought she was with you." Amara forced a smile, but the uneasy feeling grew stronger. Sade had never disappeared during an important celebration before. Especially not tonight. After a moment, Amara quietly stepped away from the dancing crowd. She told her mother she would return soon and began walking toward the outer paths of the village. The music slowly faded behind her as she moved farther from the square. The moonlight guided her along the dusty path. Amara followed the direction she thought Sade might have taken, calling her sister's name softly. But there was no answer. Ahead of her, the forest stood dark and silent. Amara stopped at the edge of the trees. For a moment she hesitated. Something about the forest felt different tonight. The wind had gone still, and the usual sounds of insects seemed strangely quiet. Yet she was certain she had seen footprints on the path. Footprints that looked very much like Sade's. Amara took a careful step forward. Back beneath the great baobab tree, Sade suddenly turned her head. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The shadowed figure listened. From the distance, faint but clear, a voice carried through the night. "Sade," was Amara. And in that moment, Sade realized something she had not expected. Her sister was closer than she should have been. Sade's heart skipped for a moment when she heard Amara's voice drifting through the trees. It was faint but clear enough to make her chest tighten. She had not expected her sister to leave the festival so soon. For a brief second, she stood frozen beneath the baobab tree, listening carefully. "Sade." Amara called again, her voice softer this time, carried by the quiet forest air. The shadowed figure beside Sade turned slightly. Even in the darkness, there was a sense that this person was studying her carefully, waiting to see what she would do next. "You didn't say she would come here," the figure whispered. "I didn't think she would," Sade replied quickly, her voice low and tense. The wind stirred the leaves above them, and the forest seemed to shift around them, as if the night itself was listening. From deeper along the path, Amara continued walking slowly toward the trees. She wasn't afraid, but she was cautious. The forest at night was not a place villagers usually wandered into, especially during a festival when everyone else was gathered in the open square. Yet the footprints on the path were clear. They looked like Sade's. Amara had grown up with her sister. She knew the way Sade walked, the way her sandals pressed into the dust. And something inside her told her that Sade had come this way. "Sade?" she called once more. Back under the baobab tree, Sade's thoughts raced. The plan she had carefully prepared suddenly felt fragile, like a clay pot that might crack if handled too quickly. "If she sees you here," the shadowed figure murmured. Sade looked toward the path where Amara's voice had come from. For the first time that night, uncertainty flickered across her face. "She must not know," Sade said quietly. "Then you must decide quickly." For years, Sade had carried a feeling she could never fully explain. It had started small, like a tiny thorn in her heart, but over time it grew sharper. Every compliment Amara received, every smile the villagers gave her sister, seemed to push that thorn deeper. Sade had tried to ignore it. She had told herself that family was more important than pride. She had reminded herself that Amara had never treated her badly. In fact, Amara had always been kind to her. But kindness did not silence the whispers in Sade's mind. Those whispers grew louder the day she met the mysterious stranger in the forest weeks ago. The first time they spoke, Sade had only come to the forest to clear her thoughts. She had been angry after hearing a group of villagers once again praising Amara's goodness. "She is a gift to this village," they had said. Sade remembered standing near the river that day, throwing small stones into the water just to watch the ripples spread. That was when the stranger appeared. The person had spoken calmly, as if they had been expecting Sade all along. "Sometimes the world only sees one star in the sky," the stranger had told her. "Even when there are many." Those words had stayed with Sade. Over the following days, their conversations continued beneath the tall trees. The stranger listened to Sade's frustrations in a way no one else ever had. Slowly, almost gently, the stranger began planting ideas in her mind. Ideas about changing her place in the village. Ideas about how easily trust could be used. And now, on the night of the Great Moon Festival, those ideas were supposed to unfold. But Amara's unexpected arrival threatened everything. Under the baobab tree, Sade stepped away from the stranger and moved a little closer to the path. She could now see the faint outline of her sister approaching through the trees. Amara's lantern glowed softly in her hand. The warm light cut through the darkness, revealing patches of grass and roots along the forest floor. "Sade, are you there?" Amara asked again. Her voice held concern, not suspicion. That simple concern made something twist inside Sade's chest. Behind her, the shadowed figure spoke quietly. You can still guide this where it needs to go. Sade did not respond right away. She watched her sister walking carefully through the trees, calling her name with genuine worry. For a moment, memories rushed through Sade's mind. 2 little girls running through the village fields, sharing food when their mother could only cook a small meal, holding each other during storms when thunder shook the roof of their small home. Those memories felt distant now, like stories from someone else's life. Sade. Amara called again, stepping deeper into the forest. This time, Sade answered. I'm here, she said. Amara immediately turned toward the sound of her voice and walked closer until the lantern light revealed Sade standing beneath the large baobab tree. Relief spread across Amara's face. There you are, she said with a gentle smile. I was worried. Everyone is asking for you back at the festival. Sade forced a small smile in return. I just needed some quiet, she said. Amara stepped closer, holding the lantern between them. The soft light illuminated Sade's face, but the shadows behind her remained deep and unreadable. You missed the dancing, Amara said kindly. Mother was looking for you too. Sade nodded slowly. Did you come alone? Amara asked. The question hung in the air. For a brief moment, Sade felt the presence of the stranger behind her like a silent breath in the dark. Amara's lantern flickered slightly as the wind moved through the branches above. And although Amara couldn't see anyone else, something about the forest suddenly felt crowded. Amara held the lantern a little higher, letting the warm light spread across the roots of the great baobab tree. The glow reached Sade's face, but the darkness behind her remained thick and unmoving. For a moment, Amara felt a strange chill, though the night air was not cold. I thought I heard voices, Amara said gently. Were you talking to someone? Sade's smile stiffened just slightly. No, she replied quickly. Just thinking out loud. Amara studied her sister's face for a moment. Sade had always been easy to read when they were younger. When she was happy, her laughter came easily. When she was upset, her eyes showed it long before she spoke. But tonight something felt different. Still, Amara pushed the thought aside. It had been a long evening. The excitement of the festival and the attention from the villagers had left her mind tired. Well, Amara said softly, everyone is waiting for you. The dancers are forming another circle, and the elders are telling stories near the fire. You should come back. Sade glanced toward the path that led back to the village square. The distant drums still echoed through the trees, steady and alive. The celebration was continuing without them. Behind Sade, hidden in the darkness, the silent figure had not moved. Sade could almost feel their eyes watching the moment unfold. Maybe in a little while, Sade said slowly. I wanted to walk by the river first. Just for a moment. Amara tilted her head slightly. The river? At this hour? Sade shrugged lightly. The moon is bright tonight. It's peaceful there. Amara followed her sister's gaze toward the darker part of the forest path that curved deeper toward the riverbank. The moonlight barely reached that direction, and the trees grew thicker the farther the path stretched. For a moment, Amara hesitated. But Sade stepped forward and gently touched her arm. Come with me, she said softly. You've been surrounded by people all evening. A quiet walk might be nice before we go back. Amara looked at her sister again. There was something in Sade's voice she couldn't quite understand. It sounded calm, but there was a tightness beneath it, like someone holding their breath. Still, this was her sister. Her blood. All right, Amara said with a small nod. Just for a little while. The two sisters began walking along the narrow path, the lantern light guiding their steps over twisted roots and scattered leaves. Behind them, the shadowed figure remained still for a moment, then quietly followed at a distance, hidden by the darkness of the forest. The drums from the Great Moon Festival slowly faded as the sisters moved deeper between the trees. The path toward the river grew quieter with every step. For a while neither of them spoke. Amara held the lantern steady, watching the soft glow dance across the ground. She could hear the faint sound of water somewhere ahead, moving gently over stones. Sade, she said after a moment, you've been distant lately. Sade kept her eyes forward. Have I? A little, Amara replied carefully. You disappear for hours. And tonight you left the festival without telling anyone. Sade let out a quiet breath. I just needed space. Amara nodded slowly. You know you can talk to me about anything. Those simple words hung in the air. For a second, Sade's steps slowed. If she had turned around at that moment, if she had looked fully into Amara's face, perhaps something inside her might have changed. But instead she kept walking. You wouldn't understand, Sade said quietly. Amara frowned slightly. Why would you say that? Sade stopped walking. They had reached a small clearing where the moonlight finally broke through the trees. The silver glow reflected off the nearby river, making the water shimmer softly in the distance. Sade turned to face her sister. For years, everyone has looked at you like you're the only person who matters, she said. Amara blinked in surprise. What? You heard them tonight, Sade continued, her voice steady but low. The elders. The villagers. Always praising you. Always choosing you. Amara looked confused. Sade. I never asked for that. I know, Sade replied quickly. That's what makes it worse. Amara took a step closer, her lantern trembling slightly. You're my sister, she said gently. None of that changes how I feel about you. But Sade's eyes had already drifted past her, toward the darkness behind the trees. Amara noticed the shift in her gaze. Sade? She asked. Before Sade could answer, a soft sound came from the forest behind them. A faint movement. Amara turned instinctively, lifting the lantern higher. The light pushed against the darkness, revealing the outlines of branches and tall grass, but nothing else. Did you hear that? Amara whispered. Sade did not answer immediately. Instead, she took a slow step backward. Another rustle came from the trees. This time closer. Amara's grip tightened on the lantern handle. Sade, someone is there. The words barely left her mouth before a figure began to emerge from the shadows between the trees. At first it was only a shape, then a silhouette, and finally, a person stepping quietly into the edge of the lantern light. Amara's heart began to beat faster. She turned to look at Sade, confusion filling her voice. Who is that? For a long moment, Sade said nothing. The river murmured softly nearby. The distant drums from the festival were almost gone now. And the stranger who had waited so patiently in the forest was finally standing only a few steps away. Amara looked from the stranger back to her sister. Sade, what is this? Sade's face was pale in the lantern glow. The plan that had once seemed so simple now stood directly in front of her. The stranger. Her sister. The quiet forest. And the choice she had made. Slowly the stranger took one step closer. And the lantern flame flickered wildly in Amara's trembling hand. The lantern flame trembled in Amara's hand as the stranger stepped closer into the pale circle of light. For a brief moment no one spoke. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and even the quiet river nearby felt distant. Amara looked from the stranger to Sade, her confusion slowly turning into unease. Sade, who is this? She asked again, her voice softer now. Sade swallowed but did not answer right away. The stranger stopped just at the edge of the lantern's glow. Their face was still partly hidden, but their calm presence felt deliberate, almost as if they had been waiting for this exact moment. I think, the stranger said gently, your sister already knows who I am. Amara frowned slightly and turned back to Sade. Sade. Sade's eyes stayed fixed on the ground for a moment. Then she slowly lifted her head. This is the person I told you about, the stranger continued, speaking calmly as if this meeting had been planned long ago. The one who has listened to her, when no one else did. Amara felt a strange weight settle in her chest. You've been meeting someone in the forest? She asked quietly. Sade nodded once. Yes. The word was small, but it echoed loudly in the silence between them. Amara tried to understand what she was hearing. She looked again at the stranger, trying to read something in their expression. But why keep it a secret? Amara asked. Before Sade could answer, the stranger spoke again. Because sometimes secrets are the only way truth can survive, they said. Amara didn't like the way those words sounded. She shifted the lantern slightly, letting more light fall across the stranger's face. For the first time she could see them more clearly. The person looked older than them but not by much. Their eyes were steady and thoughtful, almost too observant. Amara turned to Sade again. You left the festival to meet this person? Sade hesitated. Yes. And you wanted me to come here too? Another pause. Yes. Amara's heartbeat began to quicken. Why? For the first time that night, the calm expression on the stranger's face shifted slightly, almost like someone who had been waiting patiently for a certain question. But it was Sade who answered. Because you needed to hear something, she said quietly. Amara stared at her. Hear what? Sade took a slow breath, her hands tightening at her sides. For years, she began, everyone in the village has believed the same story about us, about our family. Amara's brow furrowed. What story? Sade looked toward the river, her voice steady but distant. That our father was just a simple man who died too soon. Amara's lantern hand lowered slightly. That's not a story, she said. That's what happened. The stranger gave a quiet, thoughtful smile. Is it? The question landed heavily in the air. Amara turned sharply toward them. What do you mean? The stranger stepped a little closer, still careful not to appear threatening. Some truths are hidden, they said. Not because they are unimportant, but because they are dangerous. Amara felt the unease growing stronger. Sade, she said firmly, what is going on? Sade finally met her sister's eyes fully. You remember the night father died, she said. Amara nodded slowly. The memory was old but clear. A storm had passed through the village that night. Their father had gone out and never returned. By morning, the villagers said the river had taken him. It had been a painful memory their mother rarely spoke about. Yes, Amara said carefully. Sade's voice dropped lower. What if I told you the river didn't take him? The lantern flame flickered again as the wind brushed through the clearing. Amara stared at her sister, unsure how to respond. That doesn't make sense, she said. The elders found his things near the water. Yes, the stranger said quietly. That's what they told the village. Amara turned sharply toward them. What are you saying? The stranger didn't answer right away. Instead, they looked at Sade as if silently asking permission. Sade nodded once. The stranger exhaled slowly. Your father, they said, was not just a farmer like everyone believed. Long ago he was part of something much bigger. Something powerful. Amara shook her head slightly. No, that can't be true. Sade stepped closer. I didn't believe it either when I first heard it, she said. But I've been learning things these past few weeks. Amara looked between the two of them. Learning from who? The stranger's calm voice returned. From people who remember what the village has forgotten. The clearing felt smaller now, the air heavier. Amara tried to piece together the strange puzzle forming around her. If any of this is true, she said slowly, why tell us now? The stranger's eyes glinted faintly in the lantern light. Because the past has a way of returning, they said. And because the honor you received tonight at the Great Moon Festival has brought attention to your family again. Amara felt her stomach tighten. What kind of attention? The stranger looked toward the dark forest surrounding them. The kind that wakes old enemies. Silence fell over the clearing. Amara's mind raced with questions she didn't know how to ask. Then something else suddenly struck her. She looked at Sade again. You said I needed to hear this? Amara said slowly. Yes. Why me? Sade didn't answer right away. The river continued its quiet whisper nearby. Finally, Sade spoke. Because, she said, the people looking for father's secrets believe you are the one who has them now. Amara felt the lantern tremble in her hand again. What secrets? Sade's voice grew almost a whisper. That's what they intend to find out. And somewhere deep in the forest beyond the clearing, a distant branch snapped. The sound of the snapping branch echoed through the forest like a warning. All three of them froze. The lantern in Amara's hand shook slightly, sending thin shadows dancing across the trees. Did you hear that? Amara whispered. The stranger was already turning toward the dark path behind them, their calm expression finally tightening with concern. Yes, the stranger said quietly. And we are no longer alone. Sade's eyes widened as she looked into the forest. For weeks she had been meeting this person in secret, believing she understood the situation, believing she had control over what was happening. But now the quiet clearing no longer felt safe. Another rustle came from the trees. Closer this time. Amara's heart began pounding. She took a small step back, instinctively moving closer to her sister. Sade, what is happening? She asked. Before Sade could answer, several figures slowly stepped out from between the trees. Their shapes appeared one by one in the dim moonlight, silent and watchful. Amara counted 3 of them. They were strangers to the village. Their clothes were dusty from travel, and their eyes were fixed directly on Amara. The forest that had once felt empty now felt crowded with tension. The stranger who had been standing beside Sade stepped forward protectively. You were followed, the stranger said under their breath. Sade shook her head quickly. No, that's not possible. But the truth was already standing in front of them. One of the newcomers stepped forward slightly. His voice was calm but carried a quiet authority. We were wondering when you would finally bring her here. Amara looked at Sade, confusion flooding her face. Bring me here? The man's gaze never left Amara. Yes, he said. We've been searching for the daughter of Cato for many years. Amara's breath caught. Cato was my father. The man nodded slowly. And he left behind something very valuable. Amara shook her head. You're mistaken. My father was just a farmer. A faint smile appeared on the man's face. That is the story your village was given. Amara turned to Sade, her voice trembling. You knew about this? Sade looked trapped between fear and guilt. I only learned recently, she said quietly. They told me father had secrets. That he hid something important before he died. Amara's mind raced. And you believed them? Sade's voice cracked slightly. I thought, if it was true, maybe it would finally make people see me differently. Those words hung heavily between the sisters. For years, Sade had carried her quiet jealousy. For years, she had felt invisible beside Amara's kindness and reputation. When the stranger first approached her weeks ago with whispers of hidden truths, she had listened. At first it had felt like a chance to change her story. But now the consequences stood in front of them. The man took another step closer. Your father protected something powerful, he said to Amara. Something he refused to give us. Amara felt the lantern trembling in her hand. I don't have anything, she said. That is not what we were told. The stranger beside Sade suddenly spoke, their voice firm. That is enough. The newcomers turned toward them. You promised this would remain peaceful, the stranger said. The man's expression hardened. We promised nothing. We simply needed the girl. Sade looked back and forth between them, panic rising in her chest. This wasn't the plan, she said quickly. You said no one would get hurt. The man laughed quietly. Plans change. Amara slowly realized something terrible. Sade had not meant to harm her, but she had unknowingly led these people directly to her. Sade, Amara whispered. Sade turned toward her sister, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I didn't know they would come tonight, she said. I swear I didn't. But the moment was already unfolding too quickly. One of the strangers stepped forward, reaching toward Amara. Come with us, he said. Instinctively, Sade moved in front of her sister. No, she said firmly. The man frowned. You brought us here. Yes, Sade admitted, her voice shaking. But I won't let you take her. Amara stared at her sister in shock. For the first time that night, the jealousy that had clouded Sade's heart began to crumble under the weight of what she had done. The stranger who had been guiding Sade also stepped forward. You should leave, they warned the men. You have already pushed this too far. The leader of the group looked around the clearing, realizing the situation had changed. This is not finished, he said quietly. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the strangers began retreating into the darkness of the forest. Within moments their footsteps faded into the distance. The clearing fell silent again. Only the soft sound of the river remained. Amara lowered the lantern slowly, still trying to understand everything that had happened. Sade stood frozen, tears rolling down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. Amara looked at her for a long moment. The anger she expected to feel never fully came. Instead, she saw the fear and regret in her sister's face. You could have told me, Amara said softly. Sade nodded, wiping her eyes. I know. The mysterious stranger stepped closer to both of them. This story is far from over, they said. Amara looked up. What do you mean? The stranger's eyes moved toward the dark forest where the men had disappeared. Those people will return, they said. And next time they will not come quietly. Amara felt the weight of the night settling around her. But I don't have any secret, she insisted. The stranger studied her carefully. Then they said something that made both sisters freeze. Your father did hide something, the stranger said. Amara's voice barely rose above a whisper. What? The stranger's gaze shifted between the two sisters. He hid the truth inside the one person no one would suspect. A long silence followed. Then the stranger looked directly at Sade. Not Amara. Sade felt her stomach drop. And in that moment she realized something even more shocking than the jealousy she had carried all these years. Whatever their father had hidden, it might have been hidden inside her all along. The night felt heavier after those words. The stranger's eyes rested on Sade, and for a moment no one moved. Even the river seemed quieter, as if the world itself was waiting for the truth to be spoken. Sade shook her head slowly, confusion spreading across her face. That doesn't make any sense, she said. I'm just me. Amara looked from the stranger to her sister, trying to understand what they meant. You said our father hid something, Amara said carefully. But how could it be inside Sade? The stranger stepped closer to the lantern light, their voice calm but serious. Your father knew people were searching for him long before the night he disappeared, they explained. He once protected knowledge that others wanted to control. When he realized they would eventually find him, he made a choice. Sade felt a chill run down her spine. What choice? The stranger looked directly at her. He chose to protect that knowledge in the safest place possible, within his own family. Amara frowned slightly. But we were just children. Yes, the stranger said gently. And that is exactly why no one suspected anything. Sade's mind raced as she tried to understand what that could mean. She had grown up believing her father was a simple man. A kind man who worked hard, told stories by the fire, and laughed loudly during festivals. Nothing about him had ever seemed mysterious. What kind of knowledge? Amara asked. The stranger hesitated for a moment before answering. Your father belonged to a group that studied old traditions and wisdom passed down through generations. Not magic the way stories describe it, but understanding. Knowledge of the land, the rivers, the seasons, and the balance that kept villages alive. Amara listened closely. In many African folktales and traditions, the stranger continued, this wisdom is protected carefully. But some people try to use it for power instead of protection. Sade slowly remembered the conversations she had been having in the forest during the past weeks. The stranger had spoken about forgotten knowledge, about things hidden from the village. But she had never realized how deeply it involved her own family. So what does that have to do with me? She asked quietly. The stranger softened their voice. Your father believed one of his daughters would inherit his ability to understand that knowledge naturally. He believed it would reveal itself over time. Sade blinked in surprise. But I've never felt anything like that. Amara gently placed a hand on her sister's arm. Maybe you have, she said softly. Sade looked at her. What do you mean? Amara gave a small thoughtful smile. You've always noticed things before others do. Remember when the crops were drying last year? You were the first to say the rains would come early. Sade thought about it. She had guessed that, but she had always believed it was just luck. And when the river changed direction during the dry season, Amara continued, you told Mother it would return to normal within days. And it did. Sade's eyes widened slightly. Those moments had seemed small at the time. Things she never paid much attention to. But now, hearing them together, they felt different. The stranger nodded. Your father noticed those same things when you were young, they said. He believed your mind worked the way his once did. That is why he trusted the secret would stay safe. Sade lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by the thought. So all this time, she whispered, it was me? The stranger nodded gently. Yes. Amara squeezed her sister's hand. But Sade's expression quickly changed from surprise to guilt. All of this happened because of me, she said quietly. Because I let jealousy control me. I trusted the wrong people and led them right to us. Amara shook her head. You made a mistake, she said. But you stopped it before it was too late. Sade looked at her sister, tears returning to her eyes. I was so angry for so long, she admitted. I thought everyone only cared about you. Amara sighed softly. I never wanted it to be that way. For years the two sisters had lived side by side without fully understanding each other's hearts. And tonight, beneath the quiet moon and the whispering trees, the truth was finally coming into the open. The stranger watched them for a moment before speaking again. The people who came tonight will not give up easily, they said. They believe your father left something powerful behind. Even if they do not understand it fully. Amara nodded slowly. So what do we do now? The stranger looked toward the distant glow of the village festival. The drums had grown faint, but they were still beating. You return home, the stranger said. And you protect what your father trusted you to carry. Sade frowned slightly. But I still don't understand how. The stranger smiled. You will. Wisdom like that grows slowly. It comes from listening, from patience, and from learning the stories of the land. Amara glanced at the lantern and then back at her sister. We can learn together, she said. Sade gave a small, uncertain laugh. You still trust me after everything? Amara didn't hesitate. You're my sister. Those simple words carried more meaning than anything else spoken that night. Sade wiped her eyes and nodded. The stranger stepped back toward the trees. I will watch from a distance, they said. Your father once protected many people. Now it is time for his daughters to carry that legacy forward. Amara wanted to ask more questions, but the stranger had already begun walking away into the forest. Within moments they disappeared among the shadows of the tall trees. The clearing fell quiet again. For a while, the two sisters simply stood there, listening to the river and the faint music from the village. Finally Amara lifted the lantern. Mother is probably wondering where we are, she said with a small smile. Sade nodded. And the festival. They began walking back along the narrow forest path together. The moonlight guided their steps just as it had before, but everything felt different now. The jealousy that had once grown between them no longer felt as heavy. Instead, there was something new. Understanding. As the village lights slowly came into view through the trees, Sade spoke quietly. I spent so much time wishing people would see me the way they see you. Amara glanced at her. You don't need to be me, she said. You're already someone important. Sade thought about the stranger's words. About her father. About the hidden wisdom she might carry without even realizing it. Maybe her path had always been different. And maybe that was never something to be ashamed of. By the time they reached the edge of the village, the festival was still alive with music and laughter. No one had noticed how much had changed during their short walk into the forest. But the two sisters knew. Somewhere deep in the dark trees beyond the village, people were still searching for the secrets their father had protected. Yet now those secrets were no longer hidden in the past. They lived in the choices the sisters would make from this day forward. And like many African folktales passed down through generations, the lesson of that night would remain simple but powerful. Jealousy can divide even the closest hearts. But truth, trust, and family have the strength to bring them back together. And sometimes, the greatest treasure a family carries is not something buried in the ground, but the wisdom hidden quietly inside the people who share the same blood.